Welcome to episode 3 in the Creating a Shadow Switcher series. The game's creator has granted me permission to post this content. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how I created the game's graphics and maps, not the final version I settled on, but just the beginning messy stages. This one's not so much a tutorial as it is a demonstration, and it's a little scatterbrained, so I apologize for that. I hope to have a tutorial for the next video in the series. Alright, in this segment we're going to be covering the use of the Charpad utility, which will enable us to draw these fancy characters, or not fancy really. Well, we're going to draw these characters and ladders and the wall and all the characters that we see on the screen that aren't, at least right now, that aren't animated. And in order to do that, we will need this Charpad. It's available from the itch.io site. It is a paid utility. There's other ways of doing this that are free, but I'm using Charpad for this project, so I'm going to be covering that. It's very simple. You don't really have an installer with it. All you have to do is, once you download it, is create a shortcut to it, and then it opens up like this. And so once we are ready and you have an idea, it might be even helpful to have kind of an idea of what you're trying to draw on a side-by-side. And in here within the Charpad, just to quickly go over it, you have your file menu where you can save and open new projects. You can import and export the work that you've done, your map, for example. We'll get to that. You have your history where you can do Control Z and undo. You have your tools here. We pretty much aren't using very many of these types of options. You have your view menu, the help menu, and your map menu. And then across the left here, I'm pretty much going with the defaults, except I am going to change the cell width. When we get to doing more, or when we get to creating more than one map, I'm going to need to change that cell width, but I'm going to leave it alone for now. I just want to kind of go into how we can draw characters. And so up here you have this char set, and these are going to be all the characters that you're defining for your project. And then to the right of that is your map, and that's once you've drew a few characters, you can place them on the map, and I'll demonstrate that right now. So to get started, I think the first thing we want to try is some sort of I want to call it a brick. And all you do is in this char editor, we're going to click on the character we want to define up here, and then go down to char editor, and then with your left mouse button, you hold it down and just move it around to draw your character. And with the right mouse click, you can erase what you've drawn. And for now, we're not going to really worry about colors or anything like that. I just want to show a few features of this program, and you can just kind of experiment around with something that might look like a block or a brick. And when you get to something that you're interested in trying out, over on the map editor side, we can go ahead, click the brush size and the left mouse click to paint them in. Just hold the mouse button down. Pretty much you're on your way. You're well on your way to your first map. And right here it is set to 40 by 25. So that's, hey, I don't remember doing that, but that's what we have it set to. That's why it looks like it does, and if we expand it, you can see it's set. We just have one map in here. Not by any means am I trying to get this graphics out of the park on the first go around. I don't think I ever will get them perfect, but this is where we draw. And then when you're ready to do the next character, you click over to it, and you notice it goes blank down here, and then we can just start drawing it. And I was thinking about drawing something like maybe our coin character. You know, we could just kind of experiment around. That's a rough circle. But kind of experiment around. It doesn't have to be perfect this first go around. It doesn't ever really have to be perfect. We're just having fun with this whole project. But it will give you a little bit of insight in just how difficult it is to make something look good. And at this point, we're also not trying to worry about colors, because the colors will be configured on the Python side, Pygame. At least that's how I plan to implement. And so you can see how you could have maybe a sprite over here, and you have your coin to collect, and later on we can try animating the coin. There's going to be different types of characters we're going to need. Like, for example, if we wanted to maybe do some kind of a door or maybe a block, a passage block or something. You could have it like that, where that's a door, you know. And so that's this first part of doing this, is trying to figure out. It's gonna take time. Like I spent several hours just trying to figure out what would look good for different characters, and then even deciding which characters are you gonna need. Like for example, we might need a key. So like if we wanted to draw like something round, and maybe something like this. And you don't really know what it looks like until you kind of place it on the map somewhere. And, you know, and just kind of experiment around until you find something that looks somewhat like what you're looking for. But so that's kind of where the artistry comes in. You're drawing stuff and then also putting together an entire map. We're going to need probably like a ladder of some kind, so you probably want to maybe draw some straight lines and then a line going across. And like that could also be a ladder, but I was kind of going for a door effect. But let's see what a ladder could look like. And then if I switch back to the brick, oops. That brings me to the next thing. When it's highlighted yellow, that's your left mouse button, and when it's highlighted red, that's your right mouse click on the map. So if I right mouse click, hover over something and right mouse click, it'll draw that character. If I left mouse click, it draws what's in the yellow. And I keep forgetting that. And so it seems like, oh, very quickly you could already developed a whole game, but there's other characters on here that we need to worry about. On Shadow Switcher, there's a disappearing wall. So we might need something like, something similar to this. And I think we could come in here and Control C this. I'm just gonna hit Control C. I think I've done that before. Let me see, oh, oops. And then go over here and paste. Yeah, so that works. Now we could then modify it to be raggedy or something a little different that sets it apart. And then that way, when we put it on the map here, just to make it look slightly different. And so that would indicate maybe that that when you step on that, it would disappear. And that would be an animation we'll have to implement later. So what I'm going to do here is erase this screen. One of the ways you can do that. Okay, so right now we're in draw mode, which is this brush size, and there's a bigger brush size. Well, if we wanted to highlight a portion of this, we would select cell selector mode. Go to the top left, click left shift on the keyboard, shift, and then hold the left mouse button, and that will select an area, and then I can copy Control C, oops, Control C, and then I can paste. So that's how we can kind of do that. But I can also hit Control X to delete. So if I wanted to get rid of an area, Control X will delete it, and then I can go back into draw mode. This sort of reminds me, I'm kind of haphazardly going through this, but through here you have these menu options up here where you can scroll left and scroll right, so you can kind of shift how you want things to look, and it could either make it better or make it worse, but a lot of times you might want to do that. And you can also flip things from top to bottom or left to right with some tools up here. So if we wanted to, I would say, if we're going to draw a map here, let's go into draw mode. I'm going to select the brick, and across the bottom, I'm going to call that the bottom, only because leaving room for the HUD at the bottom. If you might, in the game, we're going to need a place where we can put messages down there, like your score and other types of things. And then you just simply draw your map, like if we wanted a ladder. And this is the part where it gets a little tedious. You're trying to draw your idea, try to map it out to be similar to the actual game. And I will fast forward this part. Alright, so my PC crashed right while I was recording, and I lost what I was working on, but I do have copies of early versions of what I was working on, so I'm going to open one up. So this isn't too far off from where we just left off, and a couple of things I wanted to clarify from what I was recording earlier is that even though we're drawing it here to look like a little bit like the map in Shadow Switcher, I'm not actually going to use the characters that are developed in here, so they don't have to be a perfect match. I'm actually going to draw what the blocks or the characters look like in Paint.net or in another editing tool like GIMP, but I think I'm going to do it in Paint.net, but it not necessarily doesn't have to be exclusive to that tool. So the other thing I wanted to clarify, this is just one map, and that's why it's 40 by 25. When you want to do more maps, you would of course increase this, and so this number here would increase a lot, and this number here would increase a lot. Let's just kind of go up by 10. Oops, if it'll let me. And then in here you can turn on the grid lines. If you want this to be 40 by 25 for each section, we come over here to this map flexi grid and put in your width of each map and the height. Oops. And then that kind of gives a little grid. So this could be one map, the next one next to it's another map, etc. And then what I would do is I would highlight, pushing this button here on the left, the cell selector, pressing in the top left corner, holding the shift key down, and then clicking on the bottom right. And then I was just hitting Control C, and then I put the cell selector over to the top left of the next map area and hit Control V to paste it in. And then that's how you can get another map. And then I would just modify it. You just kind of start erasing things and mapping it out to exactly how you want. This is close to what I was working on, but it's clearly not what I had initially. But it's just an idea. It gives you a good idea of where I was. So the next part, the next kind of a segment or area that I wanted to go into is to actually draw some of these characters or these blocks, if you will, in Paint.net. So let's go ahead and go into that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the desktop, and I have a Paint.net shortcut, and this was in video 1, how to install. We're going to go into the canvas size and make sure minimum aspect ratio is turned off, switch this to 32 by 32, because you could do 16 by 16. I don't know, I think there's more resolution with a few more characters. I don't know, just take advantage of the fact that we could use a higher resolution. And then over here we're going to select the pencil, and then you can kind of draw, and it's the similar how you draw in Charpad. The left mouse click, you hold that down, and then the right mouse click to erase. Now, it does seem kind of tedious to do this, but that's part of the fun, I think, of the project. Is, you know, part of the fun of doing any game is to, if you're going to do your own graphics, is to sort of, you know, get used to how you're going to use your tools and everything, and learning new tool sets. And in Paint.net you could also do lines, and you could draw boxes and circles and stuff. So that's kind of where I started with it, and I would draw like your ladder or your block characters. And for example, you can kind of draw a line here, and you can draw, you know, just draw it out and sketch it out, if you will. And when you go on 32 by 32 resolution, down here on the bottom is kind of what it would look like full size, so you can see how off you are. It will also give you a great appreciation for what artists do. And so you could continue on this path, and there's a lot of versatility using Paint.net. But let me see, I will open up one that I've already worked on. And I created this folder called Assets just to put them in there. And so these are JPEG images, and here's a brick one that I worked on. And you can see it's fairly simple. But when you tile them together, it kind of looks like a brick. And then the other one that I worked on, you'll see right there, is the ladder. Very simple, looks like a letter H. I know it's not much of a tutorial. I'm not really prepared to do a full tutorial because I don't know a whole lot about Paint.net. I know it has a lot of capabilities, but just to get the basics and to draw something, this is all you really need. You can draw things in here with colors, and you know, when you display them in Python, they'll have that color. So when they display in, they can have that color if so. But I kind of adjust the colors using Python, kind of a different way. So I pretty much was sticking with black and white, at least in the early phases. As I was going further along and I realized I needed the same sort of characters, but I wanted to animate them, that was when I discovered that there is a tool, it was called Piskel, or I don't know how you pronounce it, but I call it Piskel. And you can draw in here and you can set up your palette and your screen size and all that. And this is a very nice tool because you can go in and you can add a new frame and then you can animate those frames. And you can see it over here at animating at your frame rate, 12 frames per second, and so on. And then by default, I believe this is already 32 by 32. Yeah, the default here is 32 by 32 pixels automatically, which is kind of cool. And so I was kind of playing around with this to generate a few graphical images, and you can imagine, or animations and things. Let's take a look. This thing lets you save out your individual frames as individual JPEGs, or you can save it out as one JPEG that you can edit later. So it gives you the capability. So it's a really nice online sprite editor, and it's very, very flexible. So let's bring in one. So I just copied a few over that I had worked on. Let's look at the lightning bolt one. This was, probably not the final. I'm gonna hit replace. Oh, it's definitely not the final one. Let's try the escalator one. I was doing a better job on that one. This is probably not the final one, but if you could see, if you had a bunch of these, so the idea with this one is when your character moves over this object, he will go up the escalator. It's moving a little fast at 6 frames a second, but if we slowed it down a little, more like an escalator going up. So you can see how we could go in, we could change the whole look of it. We can, you know, make it shorter or taller. We can play around with it until we get it exactly where we want it. You could, I don't know, you could totally tweak this however you wanted to. You know, you can see right there where it pops in right there in the second frame. And so this is only 3 frames of animation. And you could add as many as you wanted to. In some cases, you might need 4, 5, 6 frames of animation. So I really enjoy this tool, free tool, piskelapp.com. You could do these transformations here, and it just has, it's got a lot of power built into it. There's a lot of nice little features. It's for a free app that's online. So I've kind of switched from using Paint.net to using this, just because I could use the animations and do things. Anyhow, I just wanted to show that as a possibility. Going back to the shadow switcher, I did save out, as I already showed, I did save out this brick and the ladder. These are JPEGs. So, okay, yes, these are JPEGs. And I have these Piskel ones in there. I was just bringing those in just to show for this video. But let's see, the lightning, the block fading, we can look at that one. So the idea with that one was when, and this isn't my final one, but was when the character walked on them, the block would fade out. And this is just an early, you can see you go through iterations, and this is kind of an early version. Not very good at all. I was just playing around with it. But what you really want it to do is kind of look like it's fading from top to bottom. And that was what I was going for. But really like this tool though. Play around with this, and you can get your animations, you know, just the way you want them before moving on. So that was the Piskel app, and going back to Python, I wanted to show how we can load the map that we saved from Charpad, how we can load it up and display it on the screen. And so I'm gonna go in, and I kind of worked on this a little off screen using the template that was provided, but I will try to explain what I worked on. What we have here is the template for Pygame. And in there, there's a few different classes, program classes. And one of them is the game class. And what I did was in the game class, I went ahead and did a quick loop here to read in the level. And it reads in the map. C, I don't think I need C colon in here. Let me take that out. Load in the map and read only binary. And it does a file.read command. Reads the contents of the map into a variable called text, and I have a X and a Y variable basically delineating how many characters across and how many characters down, and then I am looping through for Y equals in a range of 25 and then for X in a range of 40, and I'm looping through. If there's a value of 0, we skip it, because I noticed if we were to load in this binary file, I'm not sure if that'll load, but there's a lot of nulls in there. I was looking in there, there's just a lot of null bytes. And so what we'll do is we skip those. And I have another class called block. And the intention with that was for each character that you have in your map here, for each character that we have in here would have its own class and its own sprite. That way we can do things like make the floor disappear. We can animate the coins and things like that as we go on. And then I am just creating, so for each one it creates a new sprite. So I'm going to have a screen of sprites going across. 40 sprites by 25 would be the max. And because there's no real limitation on sprites within Pygame, it makes it easier to do it. And I'm not saying this is the best way, but this is the way that I've decided to do it. And then we have a sprite group called game map, and for each one we add it in. So each character that gets read in, we add it into that sprite group, and then we just display the sprite group. The block class is fairly simple. You just pass it in the X position of the sprite, the Y position, and the tile path. So basically telling it where to find it. It's in the assets folder here. We have it here and here, ladder and brick, and then it just sets an image. It creates an image off of that and positions it for X and Y. And so the path here is passed down. So assets/ladder, assets/brick. To figure out this value for the ladder, it was trial and error. Let's run this and see if it actually runs. And so right there, you'll notice this is real. This would be very early times, right? So it is displaying a piece of the map. It's not the full. It looks like the kind of this corner, this quadrant right here. It doesn't have all, because we only have block characters in the ladder. I'm worrying about the colors later, but you could tell it is running, and there is a delineation between the ladder and the block. And basically all I did from there was to expand this case, or this if statement, turned it into more of a case statement for each of the values that were needed, and then had to expand for each different type. Now right now it's just a block. But what I wanted to do is create a block class and then have like a ladder class and a fading block class. And it gets a little complicated if you think about it like that. But for each character that's on the map would be its own, like a key class or a coin class and a door class and things like that. That's kind of a down the road thing. Just wanted to share that with you guys. That's it right there. I think I've rambled on enough for this video, but I just wanted to kind of show where I was at. I've gotten further than this, but this is kind of how I got to this point, is what I'm trying to get to. So anyhow, I know it's kind of confusing, but that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching.